Jimin's unexpected proposal to Jungkook shocks everyone, but the hidden reason behind it changes everything forever. Marry me. The words fell into the silence like a stone crashing through glass. For a moment nobody moved, the music stopped, the laughter disappeared. Even the soft wind passing through the rooftop garden seemed to freeze. Jimin stood in the center of the gathering, one knee on the ground, his hand trembling slightly as he held out a silver ring toward Jungkook. Around them dozens of friends stared with wide eyes. No one had expected this, not tonight, not here, and certainly not from Jimin. Jungkook looked as if the entire world had suddenly tilted beneath his feet. His dark eyes widened, the glass he had been holding slipped from his fingers and shattered against the floor. The sharp sound echoed across the rooftop. "Jimin," he whispered, his voice barely existed. Jimin forced a smile, but something behind his eyes seemed broken, something hidden, something painful. "Please," Jimin said quietly. The city lights stretched endlessly behind him, turning the night into a sea of gold and silver. Yet despite the beautiful view, an invisible tension wrapped around everyone present. Jungkook stared at the ring, then at Jimin, then back at the ring. Nothing made sense. For years they had been close, closer than most people understood. They shared dreams, fears, victories and failures, but marriage, a public proposal, without warning, it felt impossible. And yet Jimin was there. Waiting, breathing unevenly, looking strangely desperate, as if the answer would determine far more than his own happiness. The silence became unbearable. Finally Jungkook spoke. "Why?" The simple question hit Jimin harder than any rejection could have. His fingers tightened around the ring because he didn't know how to answer, not without revealing everything, not without exposing the secret he had carried alone for months. A secret that had consumed his sleep. A secret that made every smile feel fake. A secret that could destroy everything. The crowd continued watching. Some whispered, others recorded the moment with their phones. Nobody knew they were witnessing only the surface of a much larger story. Jimin slowly stood. The ring remained extended between them. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. The truth flashed through his mind once again. The hospital room, the doctor's expression, the documents, the impossible deadline, the choice. Every memory returned with painful clarity. 3 months earlier. Rain hammered against the windows of a small medical center. Jimin sat alone inside an office that smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. Across from him sat a doctor with tired eyes. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. The silence itself felt dangerous. Finally, the doctor slid a folder across the desk. "You should prepare yourself." Jimin's stomach twisted. He opened the folder. At first, he didn't understand what he was seeing, medical terms, charts, numbers. Then reality slowly settled over him. His breathing stopped. "No," he whispered. The doctor lowered his gaze. "I'm sorry." Outside, thunder shook the sky. Inside, Jimin felt his entire future collapse. Since that day, nothing had felt real. He smiled when people expected him to smile. He laughed when people expected him to laugh. But every night he lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking, planning, searching desperately for solutions. And every path eventually led back to the same person, Jungkook. One person he trusted more than anyone. The one person who had unknowingly become the center of his life. Not because of romance, not because of obligation, but because Jungkook was the only person capable of helping him carry the burden he now faced. Yet telling the truth seemed impossible. So Jimin chose another path, a reckless path, a shocking path, a path that had led directly to this rooftop, directly to this proposal, directly to this moment. Back in the present, Jungkook took a step forward. His expression softened. He could see it now, the fear, the exhaustion, the sadness hidden behind Jimin's smile. This wasn't happiness, this wasn't confidence, this wasn't a romantic gesture planned by someone excited for the future. This looked like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, someone running out of time. "What happened?" Jungkook asked quietly. The crowd disappeared from his awareness. Only Jimin remained, only Jimin's trembling hands, only Jimin's haunted eyes. For a long moment, Jimin couldn't answer. The city lights blurred, the cold wind brushed against his skin, and suddenly he realized he was tired, tired of pretending, tired of hiding, tired of carrying everything alone. A single tear escaped before he could stop it. The sight stunned everyone. Jimin never cried in front of people, never. Jungkook's face immediately changed. Concern replaced confusion. "Jimin, I'm scared," Jimin admitted. The words emerged broken, raw, honest, more honest than anything he had said in months. Jungkook stepped closer. "What are you scared of?" Jimin looked down at the ring, then slowly lowered it. For the first time that night, the proposal itself seemed unimportant, because the truth was finally demanding to be heard, the truth that had been hidden beneath every smile, every joke, every forced moment of normalcy. When he finally raised his head, his eyes glistened beneath the rooftop lights. "Proposal wasn't the surprise," he said softly. Everyone listened, every sound vanished, even the city seemed silent. Jimin inhaled deeply, then he revealed the reason. And in that instant, every person present realized they had misunderstood everything. The proposal had never been about creating a future. It had been about protecting one, not for himself, but for someone else. someone standing directly in front of him. Jungkook felt his heart stop as the truth unfolded, because the secret Jimin had been carrying was far greater than anyone could have imagined. And suddenly the proposal that had shocked everyone became the least surprising part of the night. By the time dawn painted the horizon with pale shades of gold, nobody on that rooftop saw Jimin the same way again, not because he had proposed, but because they finally understood the sacrifice hidden behind those two simple words. Marry me. First rays of dawn spread across the horizon, washing the city in soft gold. No one spoke. No one even seemed capable of speaking. Jungkook stood motionless as Jimin's confession echoed in his mind. The proposal had never been about romance. It had never been about creating a perfect moment. It had been born from fear, from responsibility, from a promise Jimin believed he had to keep no matter the cost. The cold morning air brushed against their faces. Around them, the gathering slowly dissolved into silence. Friends quietly stepped away, sensing that this conversation belonged only to the two of them. Soon the rooftop felt strangely empty. Only Jimin and Jungkook remained. Jungkook looked at him carefully. For the first time in months, he noticed things he had somehow missed. The dark circles beneath Jimin's eyes, the way his shoulders seemed heavier, the forced smile that appeared and disappeared like a fragile mask. How had he not seen it before? How had he been standing so close to someone he cared about and still failed to recognize the pain hiding underneath? You should have told me, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin laughed softly. It wasn't a happy laugh, it sounded tired. I wanted to. Then why didn't you? Jimin looked toward the awakening city. Cars were beginning to move through the streets below. Lights flickered on inside distant buildings. Life continued as if nothing had happened, as if his entire world had not been falling apart. I was afraid. Jungkook frowned. Afraid of me? No, Jimin shook his head. Afraid of becoming a burden. Answer struck harder than Jungkook expected, because he understood immediately. Jimin had always been the person who protected others, the person who carried everyone's worries. Person who smiled first and complained last. Accepting help was something he rarely knew how to do. Jungkook stepped closer. Spent years helping me. Jimin remained silent. You listened when I doubted myself, still silent. You stayed when everyone else was busy. Wind gently moved through Jimin's hair. You don't get to decide you're a burden now. The first time that morning, a genuine emotion crossed Jimin's face, surprise, then guilt, then sadness. His eyes lowered. I didn't know what else to do. Jungkook's expression softened. The anger he felt wasn't directed at Jimin. It was directed at the situation, at the fear that had pushed someone he cared about into carrying everything alone. Several minutes passed before either of them spoke again. Finally, Jungkook reached out and took the ring from Jimin's hand. The metal felt cold against his skin. Jimin immediately looked up. Confusion filled his eyes. Jungkook turned the ring slowly between his fingers. The sunrise reflected against its surface. You know, Jungkook said, everyone thinks tonight was about this. He held up the ring. Jimin nodded slowly. But it wasn't. It was about trust. Jimin swallowed. His throat suddenly felt tight. Jungkook smiled faintly. And trust doesn't begin with a proposal. He carefully placed the ring back into Jimin's palm. It begins with honesty. For a moment neither moved, then something unexpected happened. Jimin laughed, a real laugh, small, quiet, but real. The kind of laugh that had been absent from him for months. Jungkook smiled too. The tension between them finally eased, not completely. The problems hadn't disappeared. The future was still uncertain. But for the first time they were facing it together. Hours later they sat inside a small cafe tucked away from the busy streets. The smell of fresh coffee filled the room. Rain clouds had begun gathering again outside. Jimin stirred his drink absent-mindedly. Jungkook watched him from across the table. You still haven't slept, have you? Jimin avoided eye contact. That was answer enough. Jungkook sighed. You look terrible. Thanks. You're welcome. A faint smile appeared. For a few precious minutes things almost felt normal. Then Jungkook noticed something. A folder partially visible inside Jimin's bag. The same folder. The one Jimin had tried so hard to hide. Jungkook's gaze lingered. Jimin immediately noticed. His expression changed. The smile vanished. A familiar anxiety returned. Slowly he pulled the folder closer, as if protecting it. Jungkook's heart sank. There was still more than Jimin had revealed, more than he had confessed on the rooftop. The realization settled heavily between them. Whatever secret remained hidden inside that folder was important enough to terrify him, important enough to change his life, maybe even both of their lives. Jungkook leaned forward. What aren't you telling me? The question hung in the air. Jimin froze. Outside, rain began tapping softly against the cafe windows. Inside, the warmth suddenly felt distant. His fingers tightened around the folder. For several seconds he simply stared at it, then he closed his eyes. Because he knew the moment he opened it, nothing would ever be the same again. Jimin kept his eyes closed for several seconds. The soft sound of rain against the cafe windows filled the silence between them. When he finally opened his eyes, they looked calmer than before. Not because his fear had disappeared, but because he had reached a point where hiding no longer seemed possible. Slowly he placed the folder on the table. Jungkook watched every movement, his heartbeat quickened. The folder suddenly felt heavier than it should have, as though it contained far more than paper, as though it contained an entire future. Jimin rested both hands on it. For a moment he simply stared at the cover, then he spoke. "Do you remember 3 years ago?" Jungkook frowned slightly. 3 years ago, Jimin nodded. The volunteer program. Memories immediately surfaced. A small coastal town, long days helping local families rebuild damaged homes after a severe storm, shared meals, sleepless nights, laughter, exhaustion, one of the most meaningful experiences of their lives. "Of course I remember," Jungkook said. Jimin looked down. There was a little girl there. Jungkook searched his memory, then slowly he remembered, a cheerful child with bright eyes who always followed them around. She loved drawing, she loved asking questions, she especially adored Jimin. "Yuna," Jungkook said. Jimin nodded, a sad smile touched his lips. Yes, name alone carried unexpected emotion. Jungkook sat quietly waiting. Jimin took a slow breath. "After we left I stayed in contact with her family." Jungkook's eyebrows rose. "You never told me that." "I know." Rain continued falling outside. The world beyond the cafe windows blurred into shades of grey. Jimin's gaze drifted toward the storm. "Her parents passed away a year later." The words landed heavily. Jungkook's expression immediately changed. "What? It was an accident." Silence followed, a painful silence. Jimin's fingers tightened slightly. She had no relatives willing to take responsibility. Jungkook stared. The pieces were beginning to move into place, beginning to form a picture he wasn't sure he wanted to see. "So," Jimin swallowed, "so I became her guardian." Jungkook froze. For several seconds he couldn't react. The revelation seemed impossible. Yet suddenly countless things made sense. The unexplained trips, the mysterious phone calls, the financial stress Jimin had tried to hide, the constant exhaustion, the secrets, everything. "Been raising her?" Jungkook asked quietly. Jimin nodded. "Since she was 12. Jungkook leaned back in his chair. Shock filled him, not because Jimin had done it, because it was exactly the kind of thing Jimin would do, the kind of sacrifice nobody would ever know about. The kind of responsibility he would accept without hesitation, the kind of burden he would carry alone. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Jimin laughed softly. "Because it wasn't about me." His answer somehow made everything worse. Jungkook shook his head. "Jimin." "No," Jimin smiled sadly. "I didn't want praise, I didn't want attention." His eyes softened. "I just didn't want her to feel abandoned." A long moment neither spoke. The rain intensified outside. Inside the cafe, warm lights reflected against the wooden tables. Jungkook suddenly imagined a young girl waiting somewhere, a girl who had already lost everything once, a girl who depended on Jimin completely. The thought tightened his chest, then he looked at the folder again. The folder was still there, still unopened, still hiding something, and Jimin's expression told him the worst part hadn't been revealed yet. Jungkook noticed it immediately, the hesitation, the fear, the guilt. His stomach sank. "There's more." Jimin lowered his gaze. "Yes." The single word felt heavy, very heavy. Slowly he opened the folder. Several documents appeared, medical reports, financial records, legal papers. Jungkook's eyes moved across the pages, then stopped. A date, a deadline, a notice. His heart skipped. "What is this?" Jimin looked exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that comes from fighting a battle for too long. "House," Jungkook stared. "House where Yuna lives." His voice grew quieter. "There's a debt attached to it." The cafe suddenly felt smaller. Jungkook continued reading. The amount was enormous, far beyond what Jimin could manage alone. His eyes widened. "Long have you been dealing with this?" "Almost a year." "Year," Jimin nodded. "I thought I could solve it." Jungkook couldn't believe what he was hearing. A year, a whole year of carrying everything in silence, working longer hours, sleeping less, smiling through it all. Alone, his frustration returned, but beneath it was admiration, because despite everything, Jimin had never stopped protecting someone else. Even when it was destroying him, the rain slowly softened. Outside, clouds began to part, sunlight pushed through the grey sky. The cafe brightened. Jungkook stared at the documents one last time before closing the folder. Then he looked directly at Jimin. "No more secrets." Jimin nodded. "No more secrets. No more carrying this alone." Something in Jimin's expression cracked, not from sadness, from relief, pure relief, the kind that appears when someone finally realizes they don't have to keep fighting by themselves. His eyes grew wet. He quickly looked away, but Jungkook noticed. Of course he noticed. After all these years, he always did. A small smile appeared on Jungkook's face. For the first time since the rooftop, the future didn't seem quite as frightening. The road ahead would be difficult. There would be challenges, complicated decisions, hard conversations, but now there was honesty. And honesty had a way of making impossible things feel possible. Outside, the rain stopped completely. Sunlight spilled across the city. And somewhere far away, a young girl named Yuna waited unknowingly for the people who were about to change her life forever.
The afternoon sunlight painted long golden streaks across the cafe floor as Jimin and Jungkook finally stepped outside. The city felt different now, not because anything had changed around them, but because the truth was no longer hidden. For months, Jimin had carried everything alone. Now someone else knew, someone he trusted, someone who had chosen to stay. The weight on his chest felt slightly lighter, not gone, but lighter. They walked side by side through the busy streets. Neither spoke for several minutes. The sounds of traffic, distant conversations, and passing footsteps filled the silence. Eventually, Jungkook broke it. "Yuna, no." Jimin's expression softened immediately. A warmth appeared in his eyes that hadn't been there all day. "About the debt." Jungkook nodded. "No." Jimin looked ahead. "She thinks everything is fine." "Why?" A sad smile appeared. "Because she's finally smiling again." Answer was simple, yet it carried enormous meaning. Jungkook understood. After losing her parents, Yuna had spent years rebuilding her sense of safety. Jimin couldn't bear the thought of taking that away, even temporarily. "Protecting her." Jimin nodded. "I promised I would." Memory returned vividly. A rainy evening. A frightened 12-year-old girl sitting alone in a hospital hallway, eyes swollen from crying, hands trembling. The moment she had looked up at him and asked the question he would never forget. "Am I going to be alone now?" Even years later, the memory still hurt. Jimin had answered without hesitation. No, that promise had changed everything. And ever since then, he had done everything in his power to keep it, even when it seemed impossible, even when it cost him sleep, even when it nearly broke him. As they continued walking, Jungkook remained unusually quiet. His thoughts were moving faster than his words. Something about the entire situation bothered him, not the debt. Not the responsibility, something else, something deeper. Finally, he spoke. "Jimin, HM, when you proposed." Jimin nearly tripped. A faint blush immediately appeared. Jungkook noticed and almost laughed despite everything. "Embarrassed now? Of course I am. It was a public proposal. Please stop reminding me." The first time that day, both of them smiled. The tension eased slightly. Then Jungkook's expression became serious again. "When you proposed, you weren't only thinking about Yuna." Jimin fell silent. Jungkook had always been good at noticing things, too good. "You were scared." Jimin looked away. The answer was obvious. Scared of losing everything. Still silence. Scared of failing. Jimin swallowed. And scared of being alone. The words struck directly at the truth. For several seconds, Jimin couldn't respond because Jungkook was right. The debt wasn't the only thing haunting him. The responsibility wasn't the only thing keeping him awake. There was another fear, a quieter one, a selfish one, a fear he hated admitting. The fear that one day everyone would move on, that everyone would build lives without him, that he would eventually face every problem alone, including this one. Jungkook slowed his pace, then stopped walking altogether. Jimin turned toward him. The sunlight reflected in Jungkook's eyes. For a moment, he seemed strangely emotional. "Why didn't you trust me?" The question wasn't angry. It was hurt. That somehow made it harder. Jimin looked down. "I did trust you." "Then why keep it secret?" The answer took time. Because it required honesty, complete honesty, the kind he had avoided for months. Finally, he spoke. "Because you're important to me." Jungkook blinked. Jimin continued. "And I didn't want your life to become complicated because of mine." A painful silence followed. Then Jungkook laughed, not mockingly, just softly, disbelievingly. "You really are impossible." "What?" "You spent months suffering because you were worried about inconveniencing me." Jimin opened his mouth, then closed it again. Because when Jungkook said it out loud, it sounded ridiculous. Jungkook shook his head. "You should have told me immediately." "Maybe. Definitely." A smile tugged at Jimin's lips. The conversation felt strangely comforting. For the first time in months, someone was challenging him instead of simply relying on him. And somehow he needed that. As evening approached, they arrived at a quiet residential neighborhood. Rows of trees lined the streets. Children played near small parks. The atmosphere felt peaceful, normal, home. Jimin stopped in front of a modest 2-story house. The white paint was slightly faded. The garden needed attention. But it was clean, warm, loved. Jungkook immediately knew this was the place. This was where Yuna lived. This was what Jimin had been fighting for months, perhaps years. Before either of them could move, the front door suddenly burst open. A teenage girl rushed outside. "Jimin!" Her voice echoed across the street. The next second, she was running toward them at full speed. Jimin barely had time to react before she wrapped her arms around him. A bright laugh escaped her, the kind of laugh that only existed when someone felt completely safe. Jungkook watched quietly. And in that moment, he understood everything, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every difficult choice. Yuna looked up at Jimin with complete trust, the trust of someone who believed he would always be there. Then she noticed Jungkook, her eyes widened. Wait, she pointed dramatically. No way. Jimin immediately looked concerned. Yuna. No way. Several neighbors turned toward them. Jimin's face turned pale. Yuna, you're the Jungkook. Jungkook immediately started laughing. Yuna stared at him like she'd just seen a celebrity appear from thin air. Her excitement was impossible to contain. Meanwhile, Jimin looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. The normality of the moment felt refreshing, almost healing. For a little while, they forgot about debts, forgot about fear. Forgot about responsibilities. They simply stood together beneath the evening sky. And for the first time in a very long time, Jimin felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel. Hope. Real hope. Not because the problems had disappeared, but because he was no longer facing them alone. And as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon, laughter filled the small front yard of the house Jimin had fought so hard to protect. A house that, unknown to all three of them, held one final secret from Yuna's past, one that would soon change everything they thought they knew about her family, her future, and the promise Jimin had made years ago. That evening, the house felt warmer than usual. The smell of freshly cooked food drifted through the kitchen while soft music played from an old speaker near the window. Yuna moved around the dining table excitedly, unable to stop talking. Every few minutes she looked at Jungkook as if she still couldn't believe he was actually there. Meanwhile, Jimin sat quietly, watching the scene unfold. A small smile remained on his face. It was the kind of smile that appeared only when Yuna was happy, for years. Her happiness had become one of the most important things in his life, perhaps too important, because somewhere along the way, he had forgotten how to think about himself. Dinner passed with laughter and stories. Yuna talked about school, about her friends, about a drawing competition she hoped to enter next month. Jungkook listened carefully, occasionally asking questions that made her smile even wider. For the first time in a long while, the house felt complete, almost like a real family. The realization surprised Jimin, and perhaps frightened him a little too, because family meant attachment, and attachment meant something to lose. Later that night, after Yuna finally went upstairs to finish her homework, silence settled over the living room. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Outside, the neighborhood had grown quiet. Jungkook sat on the couch while Jimin organized some papers on the coffee table. For a while, neither spoke. Then Jungkook noticed something, a framed photograph. It stood alone on a shelf near the staircase. The frame looked old, well cared for, important. Jungkook stood and walked closer. Inside the photograph was Yuna, much younger, standing between her parents. All three were smiling, but something caught his attention immediately, something strange, something familiar. His eyes narrowed, then widened. Jimin. Tone of his voice made Jimin look up. What is it? Jungkook picked up the frame. His expression had completely changed, confusion mixed with disbelief. Where did this picture come from? Jimin frowned. Yuna's family album. Why? Jungkook continued staring at the photograph. His heart was suddenly beating faster because he recognized one of the faces, not clearly, not completely, but enough to make him uncomfortable, enough to awaken a memory he hadn't thought about in years, a memory buried deep in the past. Jungkook. Jimin stood. Concern appeared in his eyes. Slowly, Jungkook pointed toward Yuna's father. This man. Jimin looked at the photograph. What about him? For several seconds, Jungkook remained silent, trying to organize his thoughts, trying to determine whether his memory was accurate. Finally, he spoke. Seen him before. Jimin blinked. What? I know that sounds impossible. Jungkook took a breath, but I'm sure I've seen him. Room suddenly felt colder. Jimin walked closer. Shook his head. I don't know. His frustration grew. The memory remained frustratingly incomplete, like a puzzle missing several pieces. I was younger. He continued studying the photograph. Maybe 15 or 16. Jimin stared at him. Neither of them understood why this mattered, at least not yet, but instinctively both felt that it did very much. Just then, footsteps echoed from upstairs. Yuna appeared at the top of the staircase. Are you guys still awake? She smiled, then noticed the photograph. Immediately, her expression softened. My favorite picture. Jimin looked toward her. You miss them. It wasn't a question. Yuna nodded. The smile disappeared. A quiet sadness replaced it. Even after all these years, some wounds never fully healed. I do. The room fell silent. Yuna slowly walked downstairs. She took the frame from Jungkook and looked at it lovingly. My mom always said Dad was hiding 1,000 stories. A faint laugh escaped her. He never liked talking about himself. Jungkook's attention sharpened. What do you mean? Yuna shrugged. I don't know. She sat beside them. Mom used to joke that Dad had lived 3 different lives before she met him. Jimin and Jungkook exchanged glances. Something about the comment felt important. Yuna continued. Whenever I asked questions, he just smiled and changed the subject. Smile faded from her face. Never got the chance to learn more. Jimin gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Yuna leaned into the comforting gesture. The familiar movement made Jungkook realize how naturally they depended on each other, like family, real family. Then Yuna suddenly remembered something. Oh, she looked toward the hallway. Almost forgot. What? There's a box. Jimin frowned. A box, Yuna nodded. Mom told me to open it when I turned 18. Both men stared at her. What box? I found it last week while cleaning the attic. Jimin's heartbeat quickened slightly. Why didn't you mention this before? Yuna looked embarrassed. I forgot. Jungkook laughed softly. Only Yuna could casually forget something like that. Where is it now? Yuna pointed upstairs. In my room. Atmosphere shifted instantly. Something unseen moved through the room. Curiosity, anticipation, unease. Jimin felt it. Jungkook felt it too, because suddenly the strange photograph, Jungkook's fragmented memory, and Yuna's mysterious box seemed connected somehow. As if invisible threads had been waiting years to be discovered, Yuna stood. Get it. Moments later, she returned carrying a small wooden box. Dust covered the edges. The lock looked old, untouched, waiting. She carefully placed it on the coffee table. For several seconds, nobody moved. The box sat silently between them, a message from the past, a final gift from parents who were no longer there. Yuna looked nervous. What if it's something boring? Jimin smiled gently. Doubt it. Jungkook couldn't take his eyes off it, neither could Jimin. Slowly, Yuna reached for the lid. The old hinges creaked softly. The box opened. Inside were several envelopes, photographs, a small journal, and at the very bottom, a sealed letter. Across the front, written in neat handwriting, were words that immediately drained the color from Jimin's face. For Yuna, Jimin, and the young man named Jungkook. The room became completely silent. No one breathed. No one spoke. Because none of them understood one terrifying question. How could Yuna's father have known Jungkook's name years before they ever met him?
The silence lingered so heavily that even the ticking clock seemed distant. Yuna stared at the envelope. Jimin stared at the envelope. Jungkook stared at the envelope. For several seconds nobody moved. The handwriting on the front was clear, unmistakable. There was no possibility of misunderstanding what was written. For Yuna, Jimin, and the young man named Jungkook, Yuna looked up first. Why is your name there? Jungkook slowly shook his head. I don't know. His voice sounded weaker than usual. Even to himself, Jimin carefully picked up the letter. The paper felt old, years old. The edges had yellowed slightly with time. Whatever was inside had been waiting a long time to be read. Yuna's nervousness grew. I don't like this. Jimin looked at her gently. Are you sure you want to open it? She hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Answer came quietly, but firmly. Whatever secrets her parents had left behind, she deserved to know them. Slowly, Jimin broke the seal. The room fell completely silent. Inside was a folded letter, several pages long, neatly written, carefully preserved. Jimin unfolded the first page. His eyes moved across the opening lines. Then he froze. Jungkook immediately noticed. What is it? Jimin swallowed. His hands trembled slightly. Then he began reading aloud. If you are reading this letter, then many years have passed since I wrote it. Perhaps I am no longer there to explain these things myself. Yuna, if you have opened this box, it means you are finally old enough to learn the truth about your family. Before anything else, know this. Your mother and I loved you more than anything in this world. Yuna's eyes immediately became wet. Jimin paused briefly, giving her time, then he continued. The second thing you must know is that some promises survive longer than people do. Many years ago, before you were born, I made a promise to a frightened boy. A boy who had lost something precious. A boy named Jungkook. The room froze. Jungkook's breath caught. His heart pounded violently. Suddenly, fragments of old memories began surfacing. A train station, rain, a crowded street, a stranger kneeling in front of him, a warm hand resting on his shoulder. The memories were blurry, incomplete, but they existed. Jimin looked toward him. Jungkook's face had gone pale. Barely heard him. His mind was racing. The letter continued. Perhaps Jungkook does not remember me clearly. He was very young at the time, but I remember him, and I never forgot the promise I made. Looked between them, confusion filled her eyes. What is this talking about? No one answered, because no one knew. Not yet. Jimin continued reading. There was an accident, a terrible one. the kind that changes lives forever afterward. Jungkook was separated from someone important to him, someone he loved very much. He searched for years without answers. Others eventually told him to move on. But I could never do that because I knew the truth. The words hit Jungkook like a wave. A deep ache suddenly stirred inside him, an ache he hadn't felt in years, the ache of a memory he had tried to bury, his older brother, the brother he had lost when he was a child, the brother who had vanished after a tragic accident. Authorities searched, investigations followed, but no answers ever came. Eventually everyone accepted that he was gone, everyone except Jungkook. A cold feeling spread through his chest. Jimin noticed immediately, his expression changed. Jungkook's voice barely emerged. My brother. Room fell silent again. Yuna stared. The pieces were beginning to form slowly, carefully, like a puzzle hidden across decades. Jimin continued reading. If fate has guided this letter into your hands, then it means the time has finally come. Inside the journal beneath this letter is everything I discovered. Every clue, every document, every unanswered question. I kept them hidden because the truth was dangerous. There were people who wanted it buried forever. Yuna's eyes widened. Dangerous. Jimin's pulse quickened. The letter suddenly felt heavier, more serious, far more serious. He turned the page. The final section waited there. The handwriting looked slightly shakier, as if it had been written under stress. Yuna, there may come a day when you wonder why I protected these secrets for so long. The answer is simple, because some truths have consequences. If Jungkook learns what happened, his life will change forever. If Jimin becomes involved, he will face a difficult choice. And if all three of you discover the final piece of this story together, then you will uncover something far greater than a missing person. You will uncover the reason the accident happened in the first place. Jimin stopped reading. The room was silent, completely silent. Outside, the wind rattled softly against the windows. Inside, none of them moved. Yuna looked frightened. Jungkook looked stunned. Jimin looked troubled. Because the letter had answered one question while creating 100 more. Slowly, Jungkook looked toward the wooden box, toward the journal resting quietly inside. The journal that supposedly contained years of secrets, years of hidden investigations, years of unanswered questions. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, from anticipation. Because for the first time in his life, he was standing closer to the truth about his brother than he had ever been before. And somewhere within those pages, waiting patiently in faded ink, was a revelation that would force all three of them to question everything they believed about the past.